The story begins with a marine expert named Tom, who is sailing with his beloved wife Julia and their 2 children, Cassie and Ben. They cruise through the Caribbean Sea on a yacht, enjoying a family vacation. The atmosphere on the boat is relaxed. Tom and Ben are busy fishing. Cassie is focused on her gadget, while Julia decides to go for a quick swim in the calm sea. But as soon as Julia is in the water, a strange feeling creeps in. She tries to stay calm, but her instincts say otherwise. There's something big and dangerous around her. At the same time, the boat's navigation system starts showing unusual signs, but Tom is too focused on fishing to notice. Julia grows more panicked, and unexpectedly, she begins to lose strength and sinks. Julia screams as loud as she can, but her voice is carried away by the wind. Her family on the boat hears nothing. Strangely, the water around her seems to be pulling her away from the boat. Luckily, in those critical moments, Tom finally realizes something is wrong. He sees Julia struggling in the water. Without thinking, Tom rushes to the helm. Then together with Cassie and Ben, they save Julia and bring her back onto the boat. After receiving first aid, Julia starts to recover. Tom is a bit upset because he had always reminded Julia to say something if she wanted to swim. Julia apologizes, and eventually, the situation calms down again. That day turns out to be special. Ben, their youngest child, is celebrating his 13th birthday. Tom lights the candles on the birthday cake, and the whole family gives their wishes. Cassie is busy capturing the moment by taking photos of her family.
3, 2, 1.
In the middle of that warm moment, suddenly Cassie's boyfriend calls. He asks about how they are doing out at sea. But while Cassie is caught up in the conversation, a terrifying sight appears behind her. A massive storm is approaching. Cassie immediately panics, but her boyfriend tries to calm her down from afar. Unfortunately, not long after, the call gets cut off. Cassie quickly tells her parents about the storm she saw in the distance. Before they can prepare, the boat suddenly shakes violently. It turns out several large whales have surfaced around the boat. Tom, who understands marine life, explains that whales sometimes lose their direction during storms, and this time, several of them start pushing the boat, threatening their safety. To find out what's going on, Tom takes the risk and dives in, but unfortunately, he returns to the boat injured after being hit by the propeller. Julia, who works as a doctor, immediately treats Tom's wound. While stitching him up, Tom tells the family that the boat's propeller is likely bent from hitting the whales. As a result, they can't sail far. They try to fix the communication, but both the phones and the radio have no signal at all. Tom then checks their supplies. Their drinking water turns out to be only enough for 4 days. On the bright side, they are still on a shipping route, so there's still hope that another ship will pass by. But suddenly, strange sounds are heard from outside. When they go out to check, they see a glowing object falling from the sky and getting closer. In an emergency, Tom decides to take a risk by starting the boat's engine. They manage to avoid one of the falling objects, but the boat's engine ends up completely damaged. One of the objects falls so close that they can clearly see its debris from a man-made satellite. Not long after, strong winds start hitting, and the boat's navigation system begins acting unpredictable. Terrified, they all take shelter inside the boat as it keeps getting slammed by waves. Life jackets are already on, and they prepare for the worst. In the middle of the chaos, a strange ringing sound suddenly fills the air, making their heads spin and their stomachs feel sick. Tom tries to send a distress signal using a flare gun, but nothing works. The family can only hold on as best as they can. The next morning, they're grateful to still be alive. But that relief instantly turns into shock when they see a huge hole in the hull of the boat. Their yacht has run aground on a reef, and instead of being surrounded by the open sea, they now find themselves in a rocky desert that used to be the ocean floor, now completely dried up. Tom tries hard to calm his family as they start to panic. He reassures them that it's impossible for all humans to have gone extinct. But when Tom checks the compass, he finds something strange. North has shifted. That means the Earth's poles have moved. Tom explains that a phenomenon like this has happened in the past, and this time, the ocean has receded back to ancient land, most likely causing many people not to survive. Hearing that explanation, Cassie completely breaks down. She can't accept the reality. The girl runs to her cabin and asks to be left alone. While Cassie locks herself in, Julia starts checking the remaining food and water supplies. Outside, Ben releases colorful balloons into the air, hoping someone out there will see them and come to rescue them. Tom doesn't stay still. He turns on the radio and starts sending a distress signal. Unexpectedly, someone responds. A man named Neo, a submarine captain, answers his call. Now explains that his crew survived because they were deep underwater when the disaster happened. But all their communication systems are malfunctioning, and they're also hoping for help. According to Nao's calculations, the sea will rise again in about a week, and that will be a very difficult situation. Nao suggests that Tom's family find higher ground to take shelter. Hearing that, Julia immediately takes charge and tells Cassie and Ben to pack their things. But Tom is still thinking about another possibility. He asks Nao if his submarine can rescue his children. Nao answers honestly that his submarine is too small and can only take one additional person. Tom doesn't give up. After persuading him several times, Nao finally agrees to take both of their children. Tom notes down the coordinates of where they'll meet, maps out the route on the sea chart, and promises they'll reach the location in a few days. The next morning, the family prepares to begin their emergency journey. Tom steps out first to check the surroundings. From a distance, he sees a man walking toward him, accompanied by a dog. Tom greets him politely, but as the man gets closer, Tom realizes something is off. The man is injured and looks exhausted. Tom offers him water, and the man immediately drinks it all. Without warning, the man suddenly punches Tom in the face, knocking him down. Julia, who sees this from afar, runs toward them, but before she can do much, the man attacks Tom again, this time stabbing a spear into his chest. The man's dog stands guard near Julia, barking and preventing her from getting closer. Julia can only watch in horror, helpless. Once she realizes Tom can't be saved, she runs back to the boat in a half-hysterical state. The man chases her and manages to injure her arm, but Julia succeeds in climbing back onto the deck. Cassie and Ben, hearing their mother's screams, rush out of the cabin. The three of them quickly barricade the cabin door, struggling to keep the man from getting inside. Julia quickly hides Cassie and Ben inside a locker. Before closing it, she gives Cassie the flare gun and tells her to shoot only if absolutely necessary. Meanwhile, the man keeps forcing the door. Eventually, he gets inside the boat. Julia hides in the back bathroom while trying to bandage her wound. The man heads straight to the kitchen, starving. He grabs canned food, then starts checking every corner of the boat. Julia takes a kitchen knife and gets ready. The man enters the cabin, but Julia moves quickly, jumps, and hides underneath the boat. The man looks through a gap, but doesn't see her. However, his dog isn't fooled. The dog spots Julia and prepares to attack. Forced to act, Julia strikes first and stabs the dog to death. Hearing his dog's cry, the man turns around and finds it lifeless. Furious, he starts searching for Julia. On the other side, Julia tries to climb back onto the boat from the opposite direction. But before she can get in, the man catches her. Cassie sees her mother being captured and realizes it's time to act. She opens the locker, aims, and shoots the man with the flare gun. The shot sends him flying and knocks him down. But as a result, the boat starts to catch fire. Julia quickly tells her children to run while she slips into the kitchen, grabs the emergency bag, and jumps off the boat. Once outside, Ben finds his father's body lying still. Cassie and Ben immediately break down. They cry beside Julia, who gives her husband one last kiss. But there's no time to grieve. Julia sees the man also manage to jump out of the burning boat. Without thinking, she pulls her two children, and they run away, leaving the boat exploding behind them. They keep running across the scorching rocky desert, searching for shelter. Along the way, they find a river, but the water is salty, not drinkable. Cassie shares the little drinking water they have left with her younger brother Ben, but Ben refuses to drink it. He feels guilty. Deep down, he believes the man came because he saw the balloons he released yesterday. Cassie secretly feels the same guilt. But Julia cuts them off before they get lost in regret. She explains that what happened isn't their fault. Then she tells them to stay together and keep moving because the journey is still long. From a distance, Julia once again sees the man's silhouette still chasing them. They immediately pick up their pace. On the way, Ben finds the carcass of a hammerhead shark. He tries to cut it, probably thinking it could be used as food, but Julia sees the hunter getting closer. She immediately orders the kids to run. They keep running until they arrive at a wide field. Julia knows this place used to be flooded with toxic waste, but there's no other choice. Reluctantly, Julia tells Cassie and Ben to keep walking, even though she knows the risk of contamination is real. The man is still chasing them from behind. Meanwhile, the family walks across what used to be the ocean floor, now covered in piles of plastic and trash. A heartbreaking sight. Not long after, Julia realizes Ben is getting weaker. Severe dehydration. Julia gives him the last drops of water they have. Cassie starts to lose hope. She feels like they're not going to make it. But Julia doesn't let them give up. She keeps telling them to keep walking. Eventually, they find the wreckage of an old airplane that once crashed into the sea. They decide to go inside and rest for a while. Inside the plane, Julia takes out their last family photo. While looking at it, she tells the story of how she first met Tom at the hospital. Back then, Tom had decompression sickness after a failed dive. Hearing the story, Cassie and Ben can't hold back their tears. They remember their father and, in their hearts, say goodbye. That night, Cassie wakes up after hearing a strange noise. She steps out of the plane to go pee. Without realizing it, she becomes bait. The man approaches, thinking she's alone, but as soon as he gets close, Julia, who has been waiting and hiding, suddenly ambushes him and finishes him off with a knife. At dawn, they get ready to continue their journey, but before leaving, they notice that part of the man's body is already gone, probably eaten by something. It's a bad sign. Another threat, more dangerous than humans, is out there. They set off immediately. Julia checks the map while walking. Suddenly, Ben runs ahead without saying anything. Julia shouts for him, but he keeps running toward a pool of salty water and drinks it several times. Julia quickly pulls him away from it. But the damage is already done. Not long after, Ben falls ill. His body weakens and starts showing signs of poisoning. They look for shelter and find some old plastic chairs. They arrange them into a small cover to protect themselves from the scorching sun. While resting, Julia suddenly hears a strange sound in the distance. She steps out to check and immediately realizes danger is approaching. Julia quickly wakes Cassie and Ben. They start running again. Soon after, they spot a large ship in the distance. It's surrounded by containers scattered around it. What gives them a bit of relief is seeing a group of people near the ship. Julia shouts to them, asking for help, but the people suddenly look in another direction. It turns out thousands of giant crabs are rushing toward the containers. The people panic and quickly lock themselves inside the containers, ignoring Julia's cries. However, Julia, Cassie, and Ben manage to climb onto one of the containers. Julia gets scratched on her leg by a crab, but the three of them survive for the moment. From the top, they witness a horrifying scene. The giant crabs break through the gaps in the container doors and kill everyone trapped inside. Screams echo, then go silent. After everything calms down, Julia ties her wound with whatever cloth she has, but maybe due to extreme exhaustion and her serious injury, Julia suddenly collapses. Cassie and Ben panic, but there's not much they can do. The next morning, Julia wakes up and finds herself alone on top of the container. She panics and calls out for Cassie and Ben. Turns out the crabs are gone. Cassie and Ben had climbed down to look for food and weapons. Julia uses the time to treat her wound. With great courage, she burns her own wound to stop the infection. Meanwhile, Ben finds a weapon while searching through the containers. Cassie also finds a bit of food and clean water in one of the victim's pockets. More importantly, Julia finds a radio. She immediately tries to contact Nao again and succeeds. Nao tells her that he's also being attacked by deep-sea arthropod creatures. Those creatures have appeared because the sea is about to rise again. Julia immediately asks Nao to save her children, but Nao is confused because he's lost his map. He doesn't know where to go. Nao then fires a flare to mark his position. Luckily, Ben sees the signal from a distance. They immediately pick up their pace toward Nao's location. From afar, they spot a yellow submarine, but the rough terrain of the former ocean floor slows them down. Cassie starts getting upset. She feels like her mother is too focused on saving them, as if she's given up on herself. But Julia doesn't answer her. She just keeps pushing them forward, focused on one goal, saving her children. They are forced to pass through a valley contaminated with toxic waste. In the middle of the journey, a rock slide happens. Julia gets separated from Cassie and Ben. Julia realizes this might be her last moment. From behind the pile of rocks, she shouts, telling Cassie and Ben to keep going, not to stop. Cassie refuses, crying, not wanting to leave her mother. But Julia begs her. She tells Cassie, please save your brother. Reluctantly, Cassie grabs Ben's hand and they keep running. Eventually, they reach the yellow submarine. When they arrive, they find it empty. but suddenly, Nao appears from behind the vessel. He's badly injured. Nao honestly says his chances of surviving are small. He tells Cassie and Ben to get on the submarine immediately, but Cassie can't. She wants to go back and save her mother. Meanwhile, Julia is fighting off the giant crabs, using the last of her ammunition. Julia runs out of bullets. The crabs get closer. At the critical moment, Cassie appears. She climbs over the rock barrier and reaches out her hand. Julia grabs it. Cassie pulls with all her strength and manages to save her mother just before the crabs attack. The two of them run toward the submarine, chased by thousands of crabs. Nao, who has lost a lot of blood, gets overwhelmed by the swarm of crabs. But Julia, Cassie, and Ben manage to escape and get inside the submarine. Not long after, a massive wave appears on the horizon. The water starts rising rapidly. The submarine is lifted and dragged across the rocks. Inside, Julia's vision begins to blur. Flashes of everything that happened over the past few days run through her mind. Tom, the storm, the whales, the hunter, the crabs, all of it. Then she loses consciousness. When Julia opens her eyes again, the submarine is no longer moving. She pushes the door open and steps outside. Cassie and Ben follow her. They stand at the edge of the submarine, looking around. The water has carried them all the way to a city, but the city is destroyed, swept away by massive waves. Ruins of buildings are scattered everywhere. They survived, but the world they knew is gone. And that's where the movie ends.